Good afternoon. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Douglas and Sarah Allison Auditorium for our special program featuring Cal Thomas on the 30th anniversary of him being a syndicated columnist. Seems like only yesterday, I'm sure. We welcome you again and those who are joining us on our heritage.org website on all of these occasions. Hosting our program this afternoon is Genevieve Wood, who is senior contributor to the Foundry. She serves as the leading voice for the Foundry, Heritage's media outlet for news, commentary, and analysis, producing regular commentary as well as making media appearances to explain and promote Heritage's key policy solutions. Previously, she was a member of our senior management team and developed and executed both short and long-term strategies for our marketing policies. Before joining us here at Heritage, she was associated with the Family Research Council, the Leadership Institute, National Public Radio's Los Angeles affiliate, KCRW, NBC News in New York, as well as the Republican National Committee, leading in many media-related roles. Please join me in welcoming my colleague, Genevieve Wood. Genevieve?
Thank you, John, very much. Well, it's an honor for me to get to introduce one of my favorite people, Cal Thomas. And I've not really known Cal for many, many years, but I've followed him for many, many years. And as someone who wanted to be in journalism and loved political commentary, there was nobody I ever thought did it better than Cal Thomas. Whether he was writing it, whether he was saying it on television, he always got it just right. But I've had the great pleasure of getting to know him actually in person and getting to know his family over the last several years that we've been in D.C. And it's just been, he's actually smarter than I thought he was. Who knew? But before we get into, there are a number of folks here, a few folks who would like to make some comments about Cal and congratulate him on this milestone in his career. But before we get to that, the producer or the publisher of his book put together a little video that I think really sums up not only the book, but what's wrong with Washington. So we're going to show that first to kick off the event.
Ever wonder why things don't work the way they're supposed to? No matter what you try, you just don't seem to get the results you're after. You know things aren't right. Common sense tells you that, but still, aren't you tired of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? What Works? The new book by Cal Thomas. It's time to cut through all the baloney.
Now, we're not suggesting, I don't think Cal's suggesting that we take a chainsaw to the Capitol, though, who knows. Joining us now, speaking of the Capitol, is Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, a great friend of Heritage. I know also a good friend of Cal Thomas, and he wants to make a few remarks. Come on up, Congressman.
Don't clap for me. You haven't heard me say anything. And Cal's the one who wrote the great book. I do. Thank you for coming out, and what a wonderful individual to take some time and honor and celebrate. We appreciate everything that he has done for the 30 years and all the other great things you're going to continue to do. Whenever I'm giving a speech, I've done this for years. You got your little thing, you jot down a few notes, and I've written so many times in the margin the word Cal Thomas, and I put quotes around it. Because 20 years ago in, I can't remember if it was Dayton or Columbus, you spoke to Ohio Right to Life. It was my first year in politics. 1994, I ran for state representative, and Cal was speaking at an Ohio Right to Life event. and he told a joke or a story or a line that has stuck with me ever since. And he was talking about how normal people see things is much different than the way the elite national media views things. And he said, you know, regular folks in Ohio look at things one way, and the New York Times and the Washington Post see them different. And he said, I get up every morning, I read my Bible and the New York Times so I can see what each side's up to. And it's one of those lines that has stuck with me ever since. And it works every time. And I've used it, and I always give you credit, too. And before I use that line, I always ask, how many of you read Cal Thomas? And it's amazing. Everyone in the groups I get the opportunity to speak in front of, almost everyone has read Cal Thomas. I learned a long time ago. Actually, probably it was about 3 years ago, I think I sat down, we had breakfast together. Maybe even before that. It was when I was one of my first or second years here in Washington, and we talked about things. And I could tell then, as we talked about each other's stories and what we've been through, that Cal worked hard to accomplish the things that he's done. And I learned a long time ago that that's the way it works. Good things don't just happen. If you want to accomplish anything of meaning, anything of significance, it takes time, it takes work, it takes effort, it takes sacrifice. It's just the way the good Lord made it. And that is another thing that I like so much about Cal Thomas, is the work he has put in to be the kind of communicator that he is. It's not just natural talent, there's that there too, but there is a lot of hard work. My favorite scripture verse, and I shared this, it was interesting, I think the last time I shared this at an event similar to this was when Dr. Fulner was recognized about a year ago. And it's a verse that I think characterizes his life, and I think appropriately so for Cal Thomas as well. But it's my favorite scripture, 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul writes to Timothy, and it's almost like the older guy giving advice to the younger guy. And he says, I've fought the good fight, I've finished the course, I have kept the faith. And it's a verse that, in my judgment, captures what's great about America. You think about those words, fight, finish, and keep. Those are words that we associate with the American experience. And I think tonight those are words that we most definitely associate with Cal Thomas's life. He's a guy who has fought for the values that make our country special. He is finishing strong. He is keeping the faith. And that's why we all appreciate him so much, why our country appreciates him so much, and why I'm excited about the additional things he's going to do, including this book, that are going to make a difference for our great country. So, Cal, congratulations.
Thank you, Congressman Jordan. Also joining us, it's interesting, you know, most people start out in print and move to television. Cal did it the other way around. He started on the broadcasting side, radio and television, and then moved into print, and now he does all of it. He's even on Twitter. This is really amazing. I love getting tweets from Cal Thomas. But somebody who's been a part of that, and the company that's been a big part of Cal's success, and one of the reasons we're here today is not just celebrating his new book, but celebrating the fact that his column syndicated 30 years. That is like unheard of. And so the Tribune Media Company has been the one who's been behind that for many, many years. The managing editor of that, Mary Ellison, is here to make a few remarks as well. And I found it interesting that you all also have other authors in there, Henry Kissinger, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Arianna Huffington. You're in great company, Cal, with all the folks here. Come on up, Mary.
Thank you. Extemporaneous speaking is not one of my talents, which is one reason I wouldn't be a good politician, so I'm using a cheat sheet here. So, you know, there's a joke in the syndication world that anybody can write a newspaper column. And given the number of submissions we receive each year, that seems just about right. So what's the joke? The joke is a huge number of people can write a newspaper column, but the question is, can they write more than one? By my calculation, over a 30-year career writing 2 columns a week, and sometimes more if a big news event occurs, Cal Thomas has written well over 3,000 columns. And by a column, I don't mean a what was I thinking about on my way to the gym type mental outburst. I mean a piece of writing that requires research, fact-checking, often live interviews, a narrative structure, and an overall mental archive of knowledge about the news, world events, society, human discourse, how the government works or doesn't, history, religion, figures in the news, and 1,001 other details that shape any piece of commentary. Memorable commentary that lasts for 30 years must have authority and credibility, 2 qualities that cannot be faked. Then, of course, it needs a voice, and few in the commentary world are as recognizable as that of Cal Thomas. One of the biggest compliments a columnist can receive is to know that fans will read a column because of the byline, regardless of the subject. If it's Cal commenting on something, his fans want to experience it. Ask my mother, for one, who was one of his big fans and never got over the fact that I actually met him and knew him in my work. And of course, Cal's industry does not stop at writing a column. He also has written more than a dozen books, including the one we're celebrating here tonight, and his schedule is filled with TV and radio appearances, speeches, and other engagements. Of course, he has to do a lot of reading, and there's always research to uncover all the threads that tie his writing together. Oh yes, and if you want to know the lyrics of about any Broadway show in history, ask Cal. And don't even get him started on actress Loretta Young. No wonder we often refer to him as the hardest working man in show business. And when we say that Cal Thomas is larger than life, that's also only a bit of an exaggeration. Even if he weren't the size of an NBA player, his presence and voice and personality are all extra, extra large. He is a raconteur as well as a gentleman. He subscribes to standards and manners that he doesn't mind calling old-fashioned. We are proud to represent a man who has long held the distinction of being the most widely syndicated political columnist in America. To close, if we have time, I'll do this, you tell me. I wanted to read one of Cal's most memorable columns, which displays all the qualities I have attempted to capture here. A lesser person would not have done what Cal did, but here, let him tell the story, and it's fitting that it took place in Washington at an event that many of you may have attended. It was published on February 16th of 2012, and it did make national news, and it all turned out fine. I love the lead to this column. When one writes about moral convictions, it's probably a good idea to consistently live up to them. That way, people can still disagree with your convictions, but they have a difficult time accusing you of hypocrisy. Last week at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, in Washington, I failed to live up to one of my highest principles. Here's the background. The story about the Obama administration's attempt to force Catholic and other faith-based institutions to offer employees free contraception in their health care coverage was still fresh. Amazingly enough, 2 years later, it still is. I was asked to be on a panel before what looked like a crowd of about 1,000 conservatives hungry for, quote, red meat. A clip was played from Rachel Maddow's MSNBC program. It featured her commentating on that subject. I stupidly said before thinking, I think she's the best argument in favor of her parents using contraception. I then added, and all the rest of the crowd at MSNBC too, for that matter. It didn't matter that far worse things have been said about me in print or on TV. I am not supposed to behave like that. I co-wrote a book with my liberal Democratic friend Bob Beckel called Common Ground, How to Stop the Partisan War That is Destroying America. We also write a column together for USA Today. One of the principles in which I believe is not to engage in name-calling, which, to my shame, I did. The next morning, I felt bad about it, so I called Ms. Maddow to apologize. It wasn't one of those meaningless, if I've offended anyone apologies. It was heartfelt. I had embarrassed myself and was a bad example to those who read my column and expect better from me. Maddow could not have been more gracious. She immediately accepted my apology. On her show, she said publicly, I completely believe his apology. I completely accept his apology. To be forgiven by one you have wronged is a blessing, even a cleansing. Politics has always been a contact sport. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams went at each other like the worst enemies, using some of the most outrageous and slanderous language. I don't have bona fides equal to their founding of America, so there is nothing of similar magnitude on which I can fall back. Maddow also accepted my invitation to lunch, and we will soon meet in New York. I'm looking forward to it. Since the incident, which of course garnered a mini tornado of media and blogosphere coverage, I've watched a couple of her shows. Without engaging in any qualifiers, she is a strong and competent advocate of her views. Sorry. Oh, sorry. of her position. Why do so many of us only watch programs that reinforce what we already believe? Where is the growth in that? Whatever else she may or may not be, she is my fellow American. I have many liberal friends acquired over the years. They are impossible to avoid in the media, but I don't wish to avoid them. They become my friends because I stopped seeing them as labels and began seeing them as persons with innate worth. That is what I failed to do in my first response to Rachel Maddow. One might expect a pro-lifer like me to support the birth of fellow human beings and not suggest they should never have been born. I expect to like Rachel because my instinct is to separate the value of a person from his or her political position. For some strange reason, demon possession perhaps, I failed to do that at CPAC. So apology delivered and accepted, and lunch will soon be served. I'm trying to decide whose career might be hurt more should someone take a picture of us enjoying a meal, and it is to be hoped at least by me, each other. So that contains everything that a good column should have. It's a wise, humorous, there's even a bit of history in it, and it's exactly why Cal is such a great columnist, and we are proud to read him.
Well, that is very well said. I will say, as a person who was moderating that panel at CPAC and was the one who rolled in the clip of Rachel Maddow and then went immediately to Cal for comment because I knew he'd have something good to say, I set him up. Yes, I did. I can say he said it in jest at the time, but I think that column was very, very well done. Well, there have been a lot of folks who've had a big impact on Cal's career over the years, which would be true of all of us, important people along the way. But one of those is a man by the name of Tom Johnson, who could not be here tonight. But he's a former president, as many of you will know, of CNN. Prior to that, he oversaw the Los Angeles Times. And I know he was instrumental in Cal's career, but he couldn't be here tonight, so he sent a video with his remarks. So we'll take a look right here. I think we'll begin right here.
Good afternoon to all of you who are gathered here this evening, an evening where I know that you're honoring Cal Thomas. I'd just like to say that it has been my real privilege to have known Cal for many, many years. It came as a wonderful surprise to me when arriving by FedEx at my home was Cal's latest book, What Works. And I must tell you, to know that Cal dedicated this book to me will probably come as a great surprise to those who are the liberals, and it may come as a shock to those of you who are conservatives. Long ago, well before I was chairman of CNN, I was publisher of the Los Angeles Times. It was my view then, and perhaps to some extent it's still my view, that there needed to be far more balance with the editorial columnist and others who appeared in the newspapers across America. Cal and I forged a relationship, and the Los Angeles Times syndicated Cal in what became, at a point before newspapers ran into some difficulties, but at a point where it became the most circulated, most widely circulated newspaper column in America. I'm very proud of the success that Cal has enjoyed. I'm also very pleased that there is far more balance in America's newspapers and perhaps in America's television than it may have been at some earlier point. But it's a remarkable achievement, the number of successful years that Cal has enjoyed, and I know that this evening is a very special night. I so wish that I could be there, but I am unable to do so. And so, Cal, I just want to say thank you for the more than 30 years of friendship that we've enjoyed. I want to say thanks to so many of you who are in this room, who, my friends as well, know that politics makes for strange bedfellows at times, but it also has made for some interesting personal and professional relationships. So to all of you, thanks for honoring Cal tonight. Cal, thanks for dedicating what works to me, and I look forward to seeing many of you along this wonderful life's journey that we share together. Thank you very much.
Well, why don't we get about hearing from the man you all actually came here to see. And we're going to have Cal make a few remarks, and then we're going to take some Q&A, which he's been so gracious to do. So without further ado, a man who loves God, who loves his country, and certainly loves his beautiful family. Ladies and gentlemen, Cal Thomas.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'm most grateful. I should thank those who are here tonight, beginning my wife, Ray, who is over there, has been a support for me during our down times as well as the good times and is sharing in both. My first editor, Connie Pollack, who flew in from Los Angeles, greatly appreciate that. Connie edited my column for almost half of those 30 years. Jim Lomenzo and his wife, Maureen. Jim was part of the New York sales team that helped build my column in the early days, adding as many as 5 to 10 newspapers a week to the astonishment of many, many people, namely editors. 2 of my 4 children that I'm aware of, Carrie and John. John works for Hilton Hotels in the corporate offices, and Carrie with townhall.com. And who did I miss? Anybody? Well, we have Mary Elson, of course, you've heard from, Pulitzer Prize-winning managing editor, and been very supportive and encouragement to me. I wouldn't have picked that column, but I, feel a little humility now, so I'm glad that she picked it. Well, let me say a few things, first of all, about this profession I've been privileged to be a part of for more than 30 years. I started in radio when I was 16, right here at the Greater Winks in Rockville, Maryland, playing rock and roll music and reading news on the hour. It was about 2 weeks after my voice changed, so got that lower voice going. And we had great music then. They just don't write things like ba 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 dang a dang dang a ding a dong ding blue moon. I mean, there's nothing that rivals it. I mean, Miley Cyrus, eat your heart out. And I joined NBC News in Washington as a copy boy, where I was privileged, and I really mean that, overused word, privileged to work with the greatest people in broadcast journalism I've ever worked with. David Brinkley, Sander Van Oker, who took me to the White House to meet Jack Kennedy. Unfortunately, like Clinton, I don't have a picture of it. And walked around the White House driveway with Lyndon Johnson when he pulled the beagle's ears, and met every president except this one. And he won't let me near the place. I don't understand why. I filed their scripts, but before sending them to New York, I took them home and read them, and that was my writing class. And back in the early 60s, I had all of them signed pictures for me. They're all hanging in my home office today, looking down upon me. Most of them are gone. There are only 2 left. Looking down on me and reminding me what good journalism looks like. And I've never forgotten that. And I think in this profession, people who do nothing else except journalism should realize that ours is the only profession mentioned in the Constitution. And with it comes great privilege and great responsibility. And I take that seriously, and I feel that I owe something to those who have given me so much, not just monetarily, but who have demonstrated intellectual and ethical integrity in their professional and personal lives. Well, as we all know, 1 week from today is the big day. It is that day when we must render unto Caesar again that which Caesar claims but didn't earn, where we send increasing amounts of our money to Washington where they misspend it on half of the country that doesn't earn it, where we now have a nation with 47 million people on food stamps, which I regard as a disgrace, and the attitude that people owe other people. I wrote a column a few weeks ago saying that I had a deep, dark secret that I felt necessary to reveal after all these years, and that is that I suffer from income inequality. Yes, it is true, ladies and gentlemen. There have always been people who made more money than I, but I never envied other people. There was always people who made more money when I started out in the business. As a young reporter, I interviewed rich and famous people. I didn't envy them. I didn't say they owed me their money. I said, where did you go to school? What is your philosophy of life? I might want to be like you someday. But now the attitude is, if you make $2 and I make $1, you owe me 50 cents to make it fair. No, I should come to you to find out how you earn the $2. If there was only one pie from which all must eat, then it would be unfair if I took a bigger slice than you. But if I give you a recipe so that you can make your own pies, then that is fairness. Our nation is rapidly morphing from USA to ATM. We have replaced hard work with the unholy trinity of envy, greed, and entitlement. When I was growing up, a sure sign of one is getting older, my parents taught me certain values and certain principles. Look out for yourself first. Government is a last resort, not a first resource. Inspiration followed by motivation followed by perspiration lifts any boat. But today it's envy, greed, and entitlement. Is that lifting any boat? It isn't. It's making us hate each other. In 1979, the late Bishop Fulton J. Sheen got up at an event here in Washington and asked a question. How do you define a football field, he said. And he answered, by its boundaries. And the point he was making was that we have a constitution that set boundaries, not on us, but on the government, because the founders of our nation understood human nature as well as the preachers of their day. They knew that the lust for power was as dangerous as the lust for another human being. And so they sought to control the influence and cost and reach of the federal government. Well, that government now has exceeded its boundaries, and that's why we have a $17 trillion debt and are in trouble in so many other areas. We've crossed the moral boundaries that God has set for our protection, and that is why we have so many of the problems that we have in that regard. So when are we going to return to them? We know what works, which is the point of this whole book. We don't need another blue ribbon commission, another study group to find out what works. We know. As the book of Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything you think has been thought before. Everything you do has been done before. So don't think that you wake up every day and have to invent the wheel or discover the use of fire. But Washington has become like Groundhog Day, like Bill Murray in the film. Every day wakes up, same music on the radio, same conversations, same food offered down at the restaurant in the hotel, same relationships out in the street. It never changes. And that's what happens here. You watch the average program on television, the political debate goes like this. You have a host and two guests. One guest turns to the other, says, you're ruining America. The other one responds, no, you're ruining America. Well, you're a secular humanist. Well, you're a Bible-thumping bigot. Well, you're a fascist. Well, you're a commie. And the host says, and we'll be back with more civil discussion after these messages. Come on. Real people, real Americans don't communicate with each other. But it's become like wrestling. It's talk wrestling. It's fake. It's phony. And they're wasting our money in doing it. Did you know there are over 40 literacy programs in the federal government? Many of them duplicative, some overlapping. There are 3 Head Start programs. You might ask, well, what was the matter with the first one? A lot. That's why they started the second one. And that didn't work either, and the third one. And that's not working. In an editorial last month, USA Today, it said Head Start at best is mediocre. So now we're asked to fund mediocrity. Is that what America's all about? Yes, let's have America the mediocre. I don't think so. We need to change our attitude. It is no longer in God we trust. God should sue for false representation. It's in money we trust. It's in Dow we trust. It's in ourselves we trust. But it's not in God we trust. So we know what works, and that's why I wrote the book. There's Jim Pinkerton, who is here tonight. His favorite chapter is chapter 8 because he inspired it. Care versus cure. We're talking constantly about caring for people who are sick and elderly and all the rest. Wouldn't it be better if we found cures? It might cost a little more up front, but in the end, curing Alzheimer's and some of these other horrible diseases would not only cost far less in the long term, it would relieve an awful lot of suffering. So what I'm calling for is a return of the Sainted Grace Commission from the 1980s. J. Peter Grace, the businessman, was tasked by Ronald Reagan to do an audit of the federal government, top to bottom. They produced a report, probably weighed about 100 pounds, good doorstopper. Congress ignored it. Why? Because it didn't have teeth. What did have teeth was the Base Realignment and Closing Commission, BROC. They were tasked with looking at military bases and installations that were outmoded, that were no longer necessary, and to shut them down. And it gave the members of Congress cover because if one was shut down in one person's district, they could say, well, I'm sorry, you know, I didn't have anything to do with it. That was those nasty people on the commission. That's what we need. We need another commission with teeth that would audit the federal government. Businesses are audited. They are audited for better production of goods and services to save money. hopefully to hire more employees, but the federal government is never audited. One of Ronald Reagan's great lines was, "The only proof of eternal life in Washington is a government program." And how true it is. It's easier to kill a vampire than a government program, and the analogy is apt because both are blood-sucking instruments. So let's get off the constant back and forth. We've heard it all before, and focus on what works. We didn't just wake up this morning like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day and have to do it all over again. I think that's what we need to do. I don't think there's any question that another election cycle with the same old, now we're hearing about, income pay equity for women. The president wants to change the subject. No, we're going to start with two things, the $17 trillion debt, which we can't go on like this, and a foreign policy. Do we have one? I haven't seen it. Somebody tell me what it is. Write me a letter if you can tell it. I don't know what it is other than to pressure Israel to do more, to give up more so that it can be in greater danger. Well, anyway, those are just some of my right-wing, intolerant, bigoted, racist, sexist remarks that I hope, that's just some of my hate mail. I have my hate mail in the book, some of it, some of the cleaner parts. My favorite was the guy who wrote me and called me a moron and misspelled the word. Thank you very much.
Where are you disappearing to? You have to go through the Inquisition.
Oh, the Inquisition. Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
After you mentioned talk wrestling, I think how appropriate that the congressman came who is a former wrestling coach.
Yes, that's right. He's leaving.
And he's going to go over and wrestle.
He could probably body slam me.
We will take your questions. We have a microphone. If you would like to raise your hand and ask, we'll do 2 or 3 or 4 and then go out for the reception where you can hassle him in private.
And drink wine.
And drink wine. Yeah. Yes.
Tell me your name. Where are you from?
Dave Vonspach, work at Andrews Air Force Base. Basically, I know a lot of social conservatives are strongly opposed, of course, to funding family planning and birth control and Obamacare and that kind of thing. While at the same time, they have no problem wanting the taxpayers to spend billions of dollars on they oppose funding latex barriers in Obamacare that hinder the movement of sperm and eggs in wombs, but have no problem wanting the taxpayers to spend billions of dollars on steel and concrete barriers along our borders, hindering the movement of fully formed humans after they've been born. And I guess the questions I have, would not a greater, more effective use of latex barriers now preclude having to spend much more on steel and concrete barriers later? Is Barney Frank truly right in saying that the type of life many pro-life conservatives say they care about begins at conception and ends at birth?
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I think I have no idea what you're talking about, but nevertheless, well, look, I happen to believe that there are two things. There are laws that are passed by Congress and signed by the president. And if you want to change the laws about immigration, then you should go through the process. You just shouldn't declare, well, let's just open the borders. Any nation that cannot control its borders cannot control itself as a nation. And I'm all for people to come to America. I mean, my ancestors came to America. All of our ancestors came to America. But I think it has to be orderly, and you have to have a system where they are, where they learn the language, where they learn the history, and they are assimilated. This is what our forebears did, the Irish, the Italians, our Jewish friends, all of these people who came into America through Ellis Island. They wanted to become fully Americans and certainly wanted their children and grandchildren to be fully Americans. So that's what I'm for. And I think you build a barrier across the U.S.-Mexican border to keep people from coming across illegally. But you have a process where especially, and I would emphasize this, those with skills that we want, not people who are going to come here to be a burden, are admitted and are welcomed. As far as the other is concerned, I don't know what to say. Anyway, next question.
I'm offended you left out the Swiss that immigrated
Well,
to this
yes,
country.
the Swiss.
So
Actually, the Swiss have a better immigration program than we do, but
yes.
go ahead.
Next, Andrew.
Paul Hart, U.S. Department of Defense. I had a quick question about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the new website. I believe Ezra Klein started it. It's called Vox, V-O-X.
I am.
And I was reading a couple of bits about it today where their claim is that this is all about evidence and facts and logic. Has nothing to do with ideology.
Oh,
but of
no.
course, the facts, logic, and evidence all perfectly conform to left-wing views. I was going to see if you had any thoughts on why that side of the aisle tends to think they're not ideological. They're just only with what works. It has nothing to do with ideology, but what works happens to exactly fit left-wing ideology.
Well, the only human being without any ideology is a newborn. I mean, we all have it. Let's be honest about it. I think debates are good. I certainly don't hide my ideology. Anybody who says that they don't have an ideology is either a fool or a liar. So the point is, let's be upfront about it. Let's say what we believe, and let's focus on, does your ideology produce the results that you say it does? So, for example, every government program has a legislative authority or a charter that authorizes it and its purpose. So we look at it and we see, okay, are you living up to the purpose that authorized your department or program? And if so, great, we continue to fund it. And if not, we get rid of it. That's what happens in real life. It's not what happens in government. So ideology is good. People ought to admit it when they have it, and we ought to debate it and which works and which doesn't. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, he's from well, never mind. I know better to say that. For the George Allen incident, I'm not even going to go there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not from that place.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, I actually have a very responsible question. Do you think that the basic two-party system that we have now should be amended to include other parties, and that it would be beneficial to the way in which we come together and develop conclusions?
Well, of course, there have been other parties in our history. You had, the Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party. You've had two versions of the American Party, George Wallace and Ross Perot, decidedly different candidates from a different party. You've had the Constitutional Party and all kinds of other fringe parties. However much people may want to retreat into their own little cells where only they and their wife and their kids, and they're sometimes suspicious about them, believe as they believe, that's not really what America has been all about. We bring all of the ideas into the marketplace, and then we choose not perfection, which is impossible because none of us is perfect, but we choose the best combination of those ideas that promote the general welfare, provide for the common defense, ensure domestic tranquility. And what was the fourth one? You're not paying attention. I think there was four of them. Anyway, I forgot. And so I think traditionally, the two-party system works best. It's frustrating. It's sometimes aggravating, but it still, I think, is the best system that we devised. Frankly, I'd like to see the election season shortened. They have a much shorter system in the UK. I'd like to see a different system of getting the message out without paid TV. I think there's some real possibilities with the internet. There's a guy who ran for Congress against an incumbent, Micah in Florida, who ran his campaign completely on the internet and didn't pay a dime. Now that is an interesting, he lost, but still, I think the internet has some great possibilities. We got to get a lot of the money out of our politics because it corrupts. You don't give money, especially large amounts, to a political candidate without expecting something in return. So I think it's a problem. Beckel and I have a column on this Thursday in USA Today on this very subject. I highly recommend it. Yeah. Is that it? Thank you very much. No tie or anything?
No tie at the moment. I will point out that there's one wonderful quote. You know that old curmudgeonly uncle everyone ignores at holiday time, and then someone asks him a question, and you realize he knows what he's talking about. That's Cal Thomas, and that's per J. Leno on the back of the book. We do thank you for coming tonight. We're so glad our guest could be with us for this special occasion. We do have a reception available outside, and of course, most important to our author is we have his books for sale. He will be signing them, and we're going to set up a table up here on the upper level. The book sales will be down here at the lower end of the ramp, and the reason I'm telling all of you that is because it's your turn to be on television. They will be body micing our guests, and as he signs his books and you have your conversation, C-SPAN is going to include part of that in their coverage of his book. So be careful what you say. Thank you all.